my name is Deb from DG Reads, and this is my furry sidekick Kylie, and we're here today to take you camping. When you think of camping, you might think more of summer camping, and that's valid. But it's so hot here in California, I don't deal well with heat, so summer camping tends to wind up with me just overheated and not loving life. So as the weather starts to cool down, it's the prime time for camping, in my opinion. And when completing my TBR for the seasonal spooky challenge, which is a 3-month spooky reading challenge from Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy, one of the settings for that was summer camp. And I wound up actually adding 2 books to my initial TBR for that are set at camps, and decided, hey, this would make a fun theme, because I realized I had a few more that I wanted to get to that also centered around camping. I will of course have Cassidy's challenge linked down below, and Cassidy herself, and my TBR for that as well. But for this particular vlog, I'm going to be digging into some camping themed, summer camp themed horror books. I think there's some fun things we can get up to. I think Kylie will wind up with some fun toys maybe, and maybe some camping themed goodies to get done this week as well. So I have set myself up a bit of a TBR. I'm going to try to get to all 5 of these books. If I stumble into something else, things might change, as is always the case with my themes, but we'll see how far we get. So in terms of what was already on my TBR for the challenge, I had Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning, and this one is set at a summer camp for adults where people go to disconnect from all social media, all devices, and our main character is someone who was canceled for tweeting something inappropriate and has gone to this camp. Of course, things don't go according to plan. There's a bloody axe on the cover in addition to some toasted marshmallows, which actually sound pretty good. So I am intrigued to figure this one out. This is an author that I've been wanting to try more of their books. For my in the woods setting for that particular challenge, I had down The Lake House by Sarah Beth Durst, and this is an author I haven't read before, but I was intrigued by this one. It's a YA horror novel. The main character, as best I remember, shows up at this camp, but she gets there late to find it essentially abandoned, and it's just her and 2 other campers who showed up late, and they find a body in the woods and goes from there. So this one sounded like a good time. And then one I found at my local library is You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, and this is by Kaylin Barron, and this is someone that I've read their fantasy before and been aware of as a fantasy author, but I think this is their first horror novel. This is another one that's YA. We're following a group of teens working at a camp where they put on basically a slasher game, I guess you would call it, each night, recreating a slasher on the scene where they had filmed a kind of cult classic horror movie, I think. But then things take a turn and real bodies start turning up, and that's all I know going into this one. And then I have 2 books that I am picking up off of Kindle Unlimited, one being Camp Slaughter, and this one is by Sergio Gomez. This is one that's been on my radar for quite a while, and I haven't had the opportunity to pick it up yet. I'm not sure exactly if this is a camp setting per se, but it does have camp in the title. The synopsis is really brief. It says that there is a Camp Slaughter local legend. No one really knows what the truth is, but a group of college kids rents out a cabin in the woods to find out the truth, it sounds like, and there's a cannibal in the woods. So this one's on the list. And then I have one that just recently got added to my TBR, and that is Under the Blade by Matt Serafini, and this is one that was recommended to me by Lexie with Books with Lexie. This one says, some campfire stories are real. There was a infamous killing spree at a camp, and one person survived and injured the killer, and it's now 25 years later, and and the survivor, Melanie, is going back to the scene of the crime to uncover the secrets of the camp, maybe her own secrets, and I'm intrigued. Lexie said this one was one she enjoyed, so it seemed perfect to add into this vlog. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and get to some reading, get to some campy atmosphere type of things, and I'll be back once I get reading and have some thoughts to share with you. It's late at night. It's Sunday. I've got work in the morning, but Kylie's had a little bit of an upset stomach this evening, so I got it in my head to make her some chicken and rice because she's spoiled. And while I was doing that, and it's late at night, the neighborhood's quiet, it's dark, of course, so what better time than to start some horror reading, sitting out on my patio, nice cool evening, sitting in my camping chair basically, to start some spooky camp reading. And I am now about 90 pages into You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight by Kaylin Barron. And this one is a YA horror, and it is set at a fake camp, basically. We're following Charity, who is the final girl for this camp at Mirror Lake, and it is made up to appear just like the movie that was filmed there, which was The Curse of Camp Mirror Lake. And this is a job she's had for a couple of summers now. The owner of the camp has put her in charge, basically, even though she's like nearly 18, not quite 18, and she's running this camp with a bunch of teenagers. They're left entirely on their own with just very basic check-ins from the owner. And the idea of this camp is full on horror. The staff can grab the visitors and restrain them and tie them up, and they put on fake massacres every night, and maybe somebody among the guests survives, maybe they don't, but the idea is to totally freak out the people who are paying them. And they're good at what they do, they're good with the special effects, they're good at creating this atmosphere of horror. This is the setting where they filmed this camp massacre movie. It's described as a cross between, I think, Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream, so a scary movie but a little bit cheesy. And this is Charity and a couple of her friends. They had some staff hired on who have flaked on them, so they've brought some additional friends in to kind of wrap up the season, and they always go out with a big bang at the end. So I think what the author is doing really well in here is playing with the reader. We know going into this book that there is a fake slaughter happening in this camp setting constantly. So it's playing with the reader of, is it really starting or is this still the fake? And you get a couple of rounds of that and things go wrong. Things are starting to go wrong at the lake. The staff are seeing things because they stay at this camp. The visitors don't, but they're living at this camp overnight because they're working there every day, and they're beginning to see creepy things happening. A lot of it up till this point has been the setup and things starting to get hints of creepiness, hints of things going on. And I think the author's done really well with that so far. It's a really easy, quick read. It's a fun read so far. I suspect we're about to get to the point where things are going to start popping off. So I'm going to probably stop this for this evening because I think I'm just going to want to binge the whole rest of it, and I can't stay up tonight and do that. So I will save the rest probably for tomorrow. But so far, having a good time with my camp setting read, and I'll let you know my thoughts when I finish this one. I'm back with final thoughts on You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight, and overall they're positive. I think it didn't quite go the direction I expected it to. I thought the end would wind up really crazy slasher, lots of violence on page, and there is definitely violence, and there's definitely a lot of gore and disturbing moments, but I would say a lot of the actual violence happens off page, and we see the after effects. We stumble on the bodies, we see the gore that's left behind, but not necessarily really as much of it on page until the very, very end, kind of the final battle type of scene. There were some twists and turns to this I didn't expect. There were also some moments where characters just happened to be in the right place at the right time to overhear the plotting of the bad guys and those types of things that felt a little plot conveniency for me. But this is the type of book I think you're meant to just go in and not really think about it too hard and not pick it apart and just have fun with it. And it for sure accomplished that. So overall, I think I'm giving this a 4-star, on the low end of 4, maybe a 3.5 rounded to 4. I haven't fully thought it out yet, but this one is one I would recommend for just a fun time. It's super short, it's very quick, easy one read binge if you wanted to, and a good one to kind of read in the dark with the lights on minimally, because you do have to be able to see the page if you're reading it, but a good time nonetheless. Been continuing my camp journey with Heads Will Roll by Josh Winning, and so far this is looking good. This is a book about a woman named Willow. She was a sitcom star who tweeted something inappropriate, got called out for it, got canceled for it. And this not only impacts her professional life, but she winds up getting dumped over this. She winds up losing her friends, and her life is just kind of spinning. She winds up going to this camp, and it's Camp Castaway, and you have to turn over all of your devices, no iPods, no phones, no anything, and this is taken very seriously, and you are disconnected. And this sounds great to Willow. The people who have been out for her blood over this tweet can't get to her here, and it sounds like a perfect solution. When she gets there, everyone's kind of under an assumed name. She recognizes one of the fellow campers as a idol in the acting industry. She sees another woman who piques her romantic interests, and things seem to be potentially a good thing, except there is a sort of campfire ghost story about a young woman who lost her head, who comes to claim other people's heads, and it seems like a spooky good time around a campfire, except that campers have started going missing, and people and things like a knock at the door and things going missing from cabins, those type of things are leaving people unsettled and questioning what's going on. So a lot of this has been set up. We're getting into the kind of creepy moments starting to build. We've got missing people. We've got them looking for answers. Maybe there's something behind why this group of people is all collected here. I think this has a potential to really kind of ramp up in the second half, which I'm hoping for, but really having a good time with it so far. And I will let you know once I have some final thoughts. Did not expect to have an update for you this morning, but I put Heads Will Roll on my audiobook last night while I was doing some really mindless tasks and wound up just keeping going because I didn't want to stop reading. So this was an easy binge read to finish it up, and I had a fantastic time with it. I think in the end I was left with a couple of questions that I would have liked answered in the text, but it did bring me some twists I didn't expect, some reveals that were surprises to me. It definitely ramped up the gore and the rolling heads imagery at the end of the book, which I really appreciated. I think we got a lot of setup in that first half, but it all paid off in the second half. I think that the characters in here were pretty well done. The relationship in here, pretty well done. The sort of discussions on social media and what it means to be canceled and the way that impacts your life, I think had some really good discussions as well. So this is one I would definitely recommend to the horror fans out there, and thankfully it didn't put me off of camping settings or roasting marshmallows or any of the like. So I will go ahead and leave that here and be back once I start my next campy read. I am halfway into Camp Slaughter and I'm not falling in love with it yet. I think it started really strong. The first chapter we meet a married couple. They're trying to save their marriage, or at least the wife is, and they've rented this really secluded cabin in the middle of nowhere. They arrive, it's gorgeous, and it seems like maybe this was a good idea until they start hearing noises downstairs. The husband goes to investigate and they meet a man wearing a face mask made out of other people's faces, and things do not go well for this couple. This turns out not to be the trip they had hoped for to save the marriage. From there, it kind of slows down. That opening was really good. The idea of this man in the cabin was really creepy. He seems a little childlike in some ways, but obviously very violent and with a lot of issues, and it had me intrigued. Now I'm at about the halfway mark, and I've gotten a little bored in places. It's a lot of setup. It's a lot of characters, and each of them, they kind of have to go into their stories and their backstories and what's bringing them into the story itself. We are reading from the killer's perspective. We're reading from a group of teenagers who are renting a cabin, and we're also following a couple of people who are investigating weird things happening in this area. So I have hope that we're kind of getting the setup and eventually things are going to start ramping back up. And we've got the kids. They are at this cabin now. They're splitting up for various reasons, which, you know, always happens in horror. We're seeing a little bit more of what the bad guy does to his victims. We're seeing a lot of little pieces, but I need the action to kind of pick back up to really get pulled into this. I did say, I think in my TBR portion of this, that I wasn't sure how much this really had to do with a camp, and there is a camp setting in here. I wouldn't necessarily say right now it's the predominant one, but I can see why this showed up on multiple lists for camp setting horror. So it's working enough for the theme. I'm not sure it's working that well for me, but we'll see. It's a short book. I don't have any concerns that I'm not going to be able to finish it quickly, so I will be back once I have final thoughts for you. Okay, I'm doing some sprints on my channel and have used those to finish up Camp Slaughter, and fortunately this book just didn't work for me on multiple levels. I struggled a lot with the characters. There wasn't a lot of depth, I didn't feel like, with them. The cannibal character, Ignacio, I was confused what he was meant to be. He was very childlike. He definitely had developmental disabilities. He had trauma in his past, and I felt like this was playing on the idea of someone who has intellectual functioning issues and who has mental health issues being crazy and a killer, and that didn't really work well for me. The characters themselves, I just didn't feel a connection to the victims, and I think there were some relationship dramas going on. There were just some dumb teenager type moments happening, and it wasn't really a YA book. Not all of the characters are young, but I didn't feel a connection to any of the characters. I wasn't really rooting for any of the characters. The action scenes, some of them were interesting, but even there I didn't feel like it really went far enough in the direction I was thinking that it was going to. We keep being told that this man is a cannibal. We see a few images of him talking about eating human meat, but I don't quite understand why anyone would know he's a cannibal outside of being in his head, or why everyone just assumes that someone with a machete is a cannibal. This book just didn't hit for me, unfortunately. I know there are people who enjoy it quite a bit, but it just didn't work. I think the writing got a little bit heavy-handed. There was a lot of those moments of he didn't know it then, but things were about to change, or he thought he had a moment of peace, but things were really going to get worse for him in just a moment. And those types of things, I think, if done the right way and with subtlety, I think can work, but in this case it felt really heavy-handed. And I'd rather see that happening. I'd rather feel the tension. And I think that was missing in here, that atmosphere in the tension building that I want in a horror, that I'd rather feel it than have the author tell us things are about to get bad. So unfortunately, this just did not hit for me. I think it's around a 2-star. I am going to be moving on to a new book, and hopefully I'll have a much better time with my next read. But for now, that's it on this one, and I'll catch you later. I'm here because I'm now halfway into The Lake House, which is my next camping book, and I'm enjoying this one, which is really a pleasant surprise after I really just didn't enjoy that last one. So yay. In this one, we're following Claire and 2 of her fellow campers. They're all arriving late to this camp experience at the lake house. This is something their parents have all signed them up for, but because of weather or other things, they're all showing up a little bit late. They have a boat and it's taking them to the other side of this lake. It's a very secluded setting. There's no cell signal. There's nothing really at this location. The boat driver drops them off and takes off. They walk their way towards where the cabin or the place where they're staying is supposed to be, and it's not, or it's not anymore. The house and all of the kind of outbuildings of it have been destroyed by a fire, and no one is around. Pretty quickly, they find a body in the forest, and it appears that it is the camp director, and they don't know what's going on. They keep finding weird and creepy things around the forest. They have some really scary encounters, and they're basically just trying to find ways to survive. They have no food, no clean water, and Claire is someone who has a lot of intrusive negative thoughts. She constantly is evaluating worst case scenarios and didn't really expect to find herself in one exactly, but she certainly is. Her trying to manage her anxiety and her panic attacks is really a struggle, on top of the fact that all 3 of them are frightened half to death and trying to deal with the lack of shelter and life-sustaining items and so forth. I think I didn't know going into this one what direction this was going to be heading, and I have some theories at this point, at the halfway point, but I think the author is doing a good job of keeping me intrigued while also still keeping mystery. So I am really excited to keep reading this one. It's a fun time, and I think it's exactly what I want out of a YA thriller or horror. I think there's some good discussions in here happening as well when it comes to mental health and about self-image, and how Claire kind of wants to hide some of her negativity from these new people, and the fact that these new people seem to be people she could be friends with, but that's not something she's really had in her life. People who think positively of her or actually appreciate her knowledge about worst case scenarios, because in this case, maybe it's helpful. So I'm having a fantastic time. I'm looking forward to going on this, and then I'm getting looks from Kylie right now. She knows what's about to happen. BarkBox seemed to know that I was going to be reading this book because I have a few toys that came in from them really recently that I think would have helped these 3 campers out quite a bit. So I've got a little kayak, which if they could just row their way across the lake and escape that way, that would be really handy for them. I've got a fishing pole with a fish already attached, which would be really handy for, you know, feeding themselves and so forth. But I also think this is just too cute. And then last but not least, a cooler to, you know, keep their catch nice and cold, collect water perhaps. And they've got a can of lake water seltzer already prepared inside this cooler. So Kylie is staring at me quite intently, very excited to be getting some new toys. So she'll be playing with these while I go ahead and make dinner and then dive into the rest of my book. I'm back with a really quick wrap up on the lake house because I'm on a short break in a training and figured I'd use my time wisely. I wound up really enjoying this one. I don't feel like there's much I can say at this point about the plot that wouldn't get spoilery, so I'm not going to do that. I will say some of my wild theories at the beginning or in the first half did prove true, others didn't. So I think that was a good mix of things surprising me, things giving me a feeling of accomplishment for having guessed and picked up on some clues. And overall, this I would categorize just as a fun read in general. So I'm giving this one a 4-star. It kept me really entertained. It kept me wanting to come back and pick it back up. And it gave me a lot of let's not go camping on a creepy lake feelings. So I think this was a good time. I made some s'mores, enjoyed that with my book last night, so that was fun. Anytime camping comes up, toasted marshmallows definitely work for me. I like them in the oven, I think, better than actually roasting them over an open flame, but that might be a little sacrilegious, but that's okay. They were tasty. I used Nutella and graham cracker and a marshmallow and just toast them in the oven until they brown up a bit, and yum. And then Kylie was definitely enjoying her new toys last night. She was ripping into that lake water seltzer can and was doing so as I was trying to go to sleep close to midnight. I don't know where she got all this energy from, but that's been taken away from her because she did break it open, but she still got more toys to play with, so she's a happy girl and is enjoying being in training with me today before I have to go into the office later on. So that's it for me right now. I've got one more book to get to for this vlog, and I'll be back once I get going on that one. I've now started and made it halfway into my final camp book, which is Under the Blade by Matt Serafini, and I'm having a fantastic time with this one. The premise of this one is that we are following Melanie, who 25-ish years ago survived a killing spree at Camp Forest Grove, and this was done by a man who was kind of an urban legend. There were rhymes about him or tales about him. He was kind of the story that parents would use to keep their kids under control, and no one thought that he was real until he came out and started killing everyone at this camp. And the book starts in the middle of the action. We're following Melanie during this killing spree. Most everyone is already dead. She is our final girl and she's trying to get away. Obviously, from the premise, we know that she does, but there is a lot of tension in that opening chapter to get things going for the book. And then we fast forward to present day. She's a professor. Things aren't going super great with her career, but it's been suggested that she go back to Camp Forest Grove and kind of refresh her memory, deal with her trauma, and then potentially be able to write something that takes advantage of this, would give her more clout when it comes to getting tenure as a professor, and of course earn her some money along the way. So she wasn't sure about this plan, but circumstances has wound up. She's got free time and she goes to do it. And not everyone in town is happy to see her. Most everyone is very unhappy to see her. This is a town that is also dealing with the trauma, but in a way where it's turned into the horror version of Footloose. This is a town that has outlawed dances and pretty much anything that allows teenagers to gather together. That's how they're kind of coping with the fact that all of these teens died in this massacre. Melanie is feeling as if she's being watched. She's seeing things like footprints and hearing people in the room next to her or in the forest around her as she's looking around, and she's not convinced that the killer, Hoyt, really died. She's convinced that because she didn't see his dead body, he really did not die. And we're following multiple perspectives. We're following the police chief. We're following the police chief's wife, who is kind of a rebellious character. She grew up in this town and is now back with her husband's job being there. And we're also following the killer's perspective. And I'm not necessarily loving all parts equally. We're also getting kind of a flashback sequence in here that I'm not entirely sure how that's going to tie in exactly, but I'm so intrigued by all of it. I'm very much trying to figure out how much of this is just bad humans versus something more going on. It does seem like there's a lot of killing in very gory, very creative ways for no one to really realize things are happening yet. So I'm very eager to keep reading. I fully expected to enjoy this one because it was one recommended by Lexie, but I thought I'd probably pick up the audiobook since I have a few different books this weekend that I'm trying to get to that require me to read with my eyeballs because there isn't an audiobook. But honestly, I sank right into the ebook for this one and I haven't wanted to put it down. So I'm just probably going to fly through the rest of it and be back really soon with final thoughts. I have now finished Under the Blade and therefore my camping journey for this vlog, and I'm ending on a high note. I really enjoyed this one. It wasn't a 5-star read. I have a few questions. There were definitely some conveniences that I wasn't quite able to suspend enough disbelief for, but it was a really good time. It was a purely eyeball read for me, and that says a lot that I finished it basically in less than 24 hours. So that is a very big win. The action really picks up even more toward the end, but I felt like it was pretty good throughout, and I think the pacing was well done. The flashback scenes to the past events that tie into the story, I got more invested in those as the story went. There aren't a ton, I wouldn't say, of those chapters, but as I started to see inklings of how they were going to connect, I enjoyed that a lot more than I did when I first encountered it toward the beginning of the book, and I really enjoyed our main character and her will to want to survive, her final girl kind of attitude, and there were a few things toward the end I wasn't 100% sure about in terms of almost kind of villain monologue type thing, but it didn't detract from the fact that I really had a good time with this book. So this is getting a solid 4 stars from me, and I think this vlog proves that I should be on the lookout for more camp horror because it seems to be something that has good potential for me to like it. But the time has come to go ahead and wrap this up. Let me know in the comments below, do you have any camp horror to recommend to me? Do you have any of these books on your TBR, or have you read any of them? Let me know all your thoughts, and if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me some sort of emoji related to camping. And I would really appreciate it if you would hit that like button below if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my themed vlogs, more of my book thoughts, more of my bookish content in general. And for now, I'll leave you here and catch you real soon in a new video.